What is up, guys? Welcome back to another I'd Popcorn for That review. I'm Chris,
I'm Nick.
and today we're going to talk about a 2018 movie called Under the Silver Lake. It was directed by David Robert Mitchell, and it's starring Andrew Garfield and Riley Keough and Topher Grace. Um,
And
so
also,
this is it. What's
sorry,
that?
there's also another actor in it I like a lot who's just in it for a few scenes, but
Jimmy Simpson.
Jimmy Simpson. I love Jimmy Simpson.
Yeah. A lot of faces I didn't really. Sydney Sweeney I recognized,
Yeah,
but a lot of the supporting cast I didn't recognize. And I mean, a lot of this cast does not get a name.
yeah,
So for the most part, Andrew Garfield is Sam, Riley Keough is Sarah, and almost everybody else doesn't have a name. They're like Balloon Girl and stuff like that.
actress, topless
And th-
neighbor.
this is, I mean, maybe this is needless to say. It's been out for a few years now. If you haven't seen this movie, it is extremely bizarre, and I don't
Yeah,
mean that as a negative thing, but this is a really weird movie. But I think I just watched it for a second time today. I didn't mention that to
did you
you,
really?
but
I do want to watch it again and see if there's like little details that I missed because it's very like a lot of small things that connect together. It seems like.
yeah, and it makes more sense on a second watch, but it's still like it is intentionally vague on some things, and I think that's part of the point because I think you know, well, what did you think about this movie? Let's start there because we can get into the plot a little bit. I don't want to.
Yeah.
You could get really lost in the weeds at this one. I don't
Oh
want to
yeah.
do that. But
I
what
liked
did
it.
you think about the movie overall? Yeah.
I liked it quite a bit. It was really interesting. It's kind of like delving into all these like Illuminati type conspiracy theories, and Andrew Garfield's just like connecting all the dots between these different things, and it gets really interesting. But it all just begins with him being attracted to his neighbor, and he kind of like hangs out with her one night. Next night she's gone, and then all of this, just an avalanche of things happens that he's investigating, and
Well, it feels like there's obviously more than one way to look at this movie, but it
hmm
almost feels like there's nothing. Yeah, it's like there's not really much here. He meets his neighbor, and obviously there's a little bit of a crush there and a connection. They spend some time together, but it doesn't really materialize into anything. He's a little infatuated with her, and then the next day she's gone. The whole house is moved out, and it seems like in a hurry. But he's talking to his landlord about it, and the landlord's like, "Yeah, people move, man. I don't know. Like yeah, they pay the thing to get out of the lease early, and they move. What do you what?" And he's like, "Well, why didn't she tell me?" And he's like, "I don't know, man. Maybe she didn't like you. I don't know. How well do you know her?" And he's like, "Well, not very well." And he's like, "Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, people move out. Hey, speaking of rent, yours is overdue." And so that's sort of like a kind of a running theme throughout this movie is like Andrew Garfield's general apathy about what's actually going on that's really is important to his real life right now. Like he's got a notice on his door that says, you're going to be evicted in 4 or 5 days if you don't pay your rent. Your rent is way overdue, and he just consistently ignores it. He's way more preoccupied with finding this girl that he just met.
hmm
So a little bit of it is like, I think, not to jump ahead, but there's a little monologue kind of thing that Andrew Garfield has with his friend played by Topher Grace, where and it's not really the conversation that Topher Grace's character wants to have right now, but he's basically like, "Do you ever feel like you just years ago you made the wrong decision and it set you off on the wrong path, and you're not living because of that, you're not living the life that you could have lived, and I just always thought I would live to be somebody that's worth being remembered and make an impact on the earth and everything." And Topher Grace's character kind of laughs it off like, nobody really, nothing really mattered, whatever he says, I don't know,
hmm
but he's not really having the conversation that Andrew Garfield's having. But I think that's an important thing is like this movie sort of deals with how different types of people and people of different social status deal with mortality, and like not feeling like you're not going to leave an impact on the earth, and feeling like you're spending too much time doing unimportant things, and getting caught in the grind and everything, and not making an impression on the earth that stays beyond your life.
hmm
And there's a little bit of like narcissism baked into that too. Like everybody feels like they're very important, and certainly, you can get the idea that like Andrew Garfield is making This movie reads like kind of like a neo noir, dark comedy neo noir, but it's almost like a commentary, or not maybe not a commentary, but it's a twist on a neo noir where the guy who is like the playing the role of like the detective is not a detective at all. He's just
Yeah.
some guy that was very curious about this, but he acts like a gumshoe, man. He's skanking around everywhere,
He's
hiding
really
everywhere.
adept at breaking into people's windows and their houses and stuff somehow.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as the cops pull out, he's hopping in the window of the uh, Sarah character's house, and and uh, and he's finding meaning everywhere and finding patterns and clues everywhere. And to some extent, there is a story unfolding here that you know it's it's funny because like the movie kind of reads like it's gonna be about a guy who is so paranoid, almost paranoid schizophrenic, or like very
Yeah.
conspiratorial, very sees patterns in everything. He plays records backwards and all this. You can see them playing this out like he's really crazy and there's no patterns here. But the way the movie actually plays out is everything does turn out to be linked to something crazy.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. To me, I think there's obviously multiple interpretations to this movie, and I'm interested to see what you think. But to me, I don't think that you're supposed to read this whole movie as some hallucination of this guy. I think this is the stuff that's really happening, and and we can, and this is spoilery. A lot of this has been spoilery already, but we can go into detail about more about why. But I think ultimately at the end, and this might not be your takeaway at all, but I think ultimately end, it's like, no, all this stuff was really happening. The point is this guy wasted all of his time on finding out the mystery, right? And then he found out the mystery and he couldn't do anything about it. There's
Mhm.
no changing it. He didn't win anything. He can't stop it. No, nothing. He didn't win anything. And then if there is any spoiling the end of this movie, I'm going to spoil the end of this movie, but it's not any more pertinent than anything else that happens in this movie. But at the end, they're his landlord and the police are he's watching them from outside of his apartment, uh, going in there to evict him from his apartment. And so at the end, he still got kicked out of his apartment. Nothing changed for him. Nothing got better,
Yeah.
because he learned the secret. So maybe I know some people are probably saying that like this whole thing is a hallucination of this guy. I don't think it's that. I think it was all going on, but it's like those people. We'll get into it in a minute, but those people, everybody is delusional. The
Mhm.
people the rich people who are doing this crazy thing, I think they're delusional too. Like they're
Yeah.
wrong about what they're doing too. I don't know. What did you think the ultimate? Do you think he's
I mean, it definitely went a different way than I thought it was going to go in the end because there's this whole overarching story about the dog killer. Like all these dogs keep getting killed and there's like people spray painting "Beware the dog killer."
mm-hmm.
And I really thought it was going to come full circle and he was having like these crazy hallucinations and he was the dog killer, which it never really states that he was or wasn't, but
You
he
could come away from this thinking he was for sure.
yeah, because there's this whole scene at towards the end of the movie where this homeless, the king of the homeless,
Yeah,
has
the
him
homeless king.
tied up and he's like, "Why do you have dog biscuits in your pocket?" And it's like,
Yeah,
if he answers wrong, like they're gonna kill him.
and he has a story about why, but it's not super believable. And then for some reason he just says like he says I dated a girl that had a
Yeah, a
dog,
dog.
and I thought and he's like, nah, man, but how long ago did you date this girl? And he's like, well, it's been a long time. And he's like, why do you have dog biscuits
He's like,
in your pocket?
I just wanted things to be how they were and feed her dog biscuits and rub its ears and make
And
everything
then
right
everything would be
again.
okay. And he's like okay. And then he basically unties him and he's like, bye.
It's like, so you're not gonna kill me? He's like, we'll see. Like,
We'll see.
see how it goes. And there
uh
are multiple strange things because like all the things he investigates seem like they could be their own individual conspiracy theories, but they all do kind of interconnect. And
and it's all very like there's David Lynch vibes in here.
hmm
You know what I'm saying? And I think it's intentional because surely this guy was inspired by somebody, and I think that's certainly one of the people he was inspired by. But also he uses a David Lynch regular actor. I didn't down the guy's name. I should have. But the actor who plays the guy who does there's like a guy who does these zines that kind of get Andrew Garfield's character even deeper into these because he's already a conspiratorial guy.
I can't think of his name either, but he's a very recognizable guy. If you when you see him, you're like, I know
Odd
him.
he always plays an odd character.
Yeah,
And but yeah, so there's the dog killer thing, which could very well be a red herring. You're not supposed to know,
I
but
think
it could
they're
be that
yeah.
he's the dog killer because he is having like all these hallucinations about women. Some of them are pretty brutal,
Hmm.
but all these conversations about, or all these hallucinations of women, like, it'll be Sarah in a pool naked, and then she starts barking like a dog, or all these girls are berating him because he's in the women's bathroom asking people where Sarah is, and they're screaming at him, and that turns into them all barking like a dog. So it could be a thing of where like this guy's delusional and he has a thing with dogs that isn't going to get explained, and he kills dogs and doesn't even realize he's doing it. Is the thing
Yeah,
it could be, or because he's got the dog biscuits and there's a whole thing, but it could be just a whole red herring and there's nothing to that. Because I think there's certainly some things in this movie that I think lead nowhere
yeah.
ever,
Like
and
the
you're not going
owl's
to be able to
kiss.
crack it. Yeah, there's this thing called the Owl's Kiss, which is supposed to be like this supernatural question
Yeah,
mark. I don't
crypt.
know,
I couldn't.
woman
Yeah,
who
it was like a
wears
almost like a
this.
cryptid, but then he also explains that like it works for the ultra rich to kill people and stuff.
And it says that she's wearing, like, she wears nothing but her like she's naked except for this taxidermied owl mask, which there's nothing supernatural about that. I mean, you could wear a taxidermied owl mask, but it's like she works for the elite rich, and like you're under her control as long as you have money. And so the way I read into it was because I've always heard it called a spider, but there's this famous little thing that people have noticed on dollar bills that's like a little anomaly on the design behind like the left upper hand corner of the one on the $1 bill, and it kind of looks like a little spider. Well, in this movie, it's an owl's face, and you're under. If everybody that has money is under the watch of the owl, and you could get the owl's kiss and killed, and so we see people like there are people that are killed by the owl's kiss, but when we see the closest encounter with the owl's kiss, it's with Andrew Garfield's character. He's armed with a gun, she has a knife, and I guess she gets scared by the gun and all
Hmm.
she has is the knife. But the other way to look at it is this guy doesn't have any money,
Yeah.
and maybe you're only threatened by the owl's kiss if you have money, because he's there's like an ongoing thing all throughout this movie where people ask him how his job's doing. Are you working right now? What's your job like? How's your job? How you like your job? How's your job going? And he's like kind of irritated by it, but it's because he doesn't have a job. I mean, he doesn't have a
Hmm.
job, you know, and so he doesn't have a job. He can't pay his rent. His car gets repossessed. He's got no money.
By
So
the way,
that was my interpretation there.
I did love that scene. So he like walks out to his car one night. It's all keyed up with the big old dick on the hood and like down the side. And he sees some
Yeah, yeah.
kids down the way like keying cars, peeing on him, throwing eggs. And he like sneaks up on them. They're probably like 12, 13 years old, much smaller than
Little,
him,
yeah,
and
yeah, young
just
guys.
beats the shit out of these two kids. And it was
Shoves
that
an
was.
egg in the guy's mouth, in the kid's mouth.
I thought it was
Yeah,
pretty. That was pretty funny. And
and nothing really comes of that.
no.
The other thing is the squirrel at the beginning.
Yeah, it
There's
just
a
falls out
squirrel
of a
that like
tree and splats in
falls out of
front
the
of him.
tree, splats in front of him, organs everywhere, and it gives him it gives him like a cinematic like movie death look
Yeah,
for seemingly no reason. That doesn't link back to anything as far as I can tell. There's nothing.
I don't
There's
think
nothing
so.
to that. And same thing with the 751. So he's like following the girls there's like some girls that get some stuff out of the house after Sarah uh and all her roommates move out. There's this girl that goes and gets a box out of the house, and he like narrowly avoids getting caught because he's snuck into the house. And they take the box and they go on this like little mission to a lake, and they get on like a paddle boat, and he's hilariously just following them everywhere, including getting a like renting a paddle boat himself, and or a pedal boat himself, and he's following them all around the lake. And then they meet people at this one spot, pass off the box, and there's this pirate guy that keeps showing up everywhere, and he's like the transfer person between whatever.
Yeah, because nothing
But
really
like,
happens with him either. He's in it like multiple times, and you think like, man, you really needs to find this guy, and then he just nothing happens with him.
I think the link there is he's just the person who's like he like works for
The ultra
this,
rich or something, or
yeah, the ultra rich or whatever, getting. So I guess we're already getting spoilers, but let's just say that like we're ruining everything about this, so you should
yeah,
watch it. But there's a band that's really prevalent, especially at the beginning of the movie, called Jesus and the Brides of Dracula,
Yeah.
and they have this song called Turning Teeth that really seems like it's supposed to have some cryptic meaning to it, like the lyrics are strange and everything, and they're playing a concert, and the it's like a weird kind of relationship where it's like these three girls that are the brides of this Jesus character, and they're playing a role for the sake of rock and roll, but it ends up playing like it kind of plays into the plot, because what ultimately is going on is, big spoiler, is that the ultra rich of the world have this thing that they've worked out where there's these like interconnected tunnels underground under the Silver Lake, where it looks like bomb shelters basically, but it's like these rooms where they stash all their earthly possessions that they care about, and they have three quote unquote wives that they're put into these like basically tombs,
Mhm.
and the idea is like sort of like the pyramids of Egypt, or any kind of tomb, that the idea is to preserve this person's legacy forever. But they don't wait to die. Like they have this arrangement where like when the time comes, they get their three quote unquote wives together. They're sealed into this chamber. They have enough food and whatever to last them 6 months, and then they ascend,
Yeah,
which
they
isn't explained very well at all.
it's basically like they have this belief that they're going to ascend and all become energy in this wonderful world where they aren't dead, they're just in this other dimension basically.
Because he says like, "What do you mean?" Like, because Andrew Garfield finds out about this, and
Mhm.
he's like, "What do you mean, like heaven?" And he's like, "No, no, no. It's first of all, it's real, and second of all, it's a whole different thing than heaven." But it's like, well, you don't really explain it well enough for me to know what you're talking about. I mean, he says like, "Oh, we're gonna break through this something about an amniotic sac or something like
Mhm.
that." Like, it sounds very metaphysical and everything, and we don't see any proof that actually happened. So from Andrew Garfield's perspective and our perspective as the audience, you're just gonna die in there.
Yeah.
You're just gonna die in 6 months, and everybody that got. And so I think too there is like a metaphor there for,
Well, it
well, two things. Like, well, go ahead.
it was also they were also saying basically like nobody's gonna find these for 1,000 years, and they're gonna know that we were powerful people, just like the pharaohs were in ancient Egypt. Like that's the whole reasoning behind this is
Yeah,
they've built their tombs and they'll find my body and my wife's bodies and know
kings
that
with
we
no
were
statues.
that we were the kings of this time.
Yeah, and so that was my other thing too. Is like they're all just dealing with the same existential problem of like finding ultimate meaning in this universe, and finding like giving your life purpose and everything. It's Andrew Garfield's trying to find that through, you know unraveling these patterns and thinking he's finding the secret knowledge of the elites and everything, because he talks a lot about like, don't you think rich people know a lot of things that we don't know, and this girl that's, must be like a casual romantic
Yeah.
fling of his or whatever. There's a lot of casual romantic flings of his in this movie, but
And that's a fun thing, like not a fun thing, but an interesting thing I thought too, because that's the conversation he's kind of having with Harry is like, I think, don't you think that there's like meaning in all of this media that isn't meant for us, that only powerful people get the messages from? And he's talking
right.
about how, there's so much sex in the media and everything, and it's there's something to it. And this movie is kind of meta with that because he's sleeping with a ton of girls. There's
Yeah,
a
all
ton of
throughout
naked
this movie.
girls. He's butt naked a lot of the time. Not a lot of time, but a few times. So they kind of
And
like
it's
get meta with that.
so I think there's something to be. I think there's like like sort of an underlying story there about how Hollywood sort of puts all these girls on this like metaphorical conveyor belt, and they just get chewed up and spit out by Hollywood.
Mhm.
And so you make a little cheap movie, and then your claim to fame is going to be that you died in a tomb with a rich guy, you
Yeah.
know. And so I think there's like a subtextual thing going on there with how Hollywood treats these starlets that are trying to make something to themselves, and end up being like just objects of sexual gratification for people, or something to, pretty arm candy for some powerful elite man.
Well,
um,
and it seems like not that they want to, but Sarah seemed like that was kind of what she was trying to get at because when they're hanging out in that first the only time they hang out really. They're watching a movie, and the movie is called How to Marry a Millionaire, and she has a poster on it. It's probably like an old like 50s, 60s movie, and she has three dolls of the actresses from the movie. So like that's her whole goal is to like it seems like is to marry this millionaire. And
And you know, and like you were saying, there's a bunch of things in this movie that link back up to other things that seem so menial and unimportant in the beginning. So there's all this banal stuff that seems to have no link to anything, and it all kind of by the end of the movie, almost everything makes a reappearance in some
yeah,
form or another. So like, there's there's a Playboy magazine that he like stole from his dad or something when he was younger, and he says it's the first thing he ever masturbated to. Well, the cover of that Playboy magazine gets like replicated in real life because he meets up with the daughter of this man who everyone thinks is dead, and it's actually like the most recent celebrity to go missing who turns out to be in one of these underground tombs, and he's in the one with Sarah.
hmm
Um, but he meets up with the daughter of that woman, and they're like swimming in a. I don't remember all the context there, but they.
it was basically like he told her that he found out all these interconnected things, and she's like, "Well, what do you know?" And they start walking, and then they go swimming in this reservoir, and she was like, "I'm being followed. I wanted them to think we are coming out here to screw." And then
Yeah,
like he kind of like gives her more context to like what was going on, which he doesn't know the ultimate thing about them being buried yet, but he knows
and
that he found the bunkers.
she gets shot in the water and replicates like the exact image from the Playboy magazine.
Yeah.
And oh, I noticed something funny too that I'm just now thinking of. It's not really related to that, but did you notice? I only noticed this for sure on rewatch, but Heather noticed it the first time, and I didn't get that it was like for sure a reference to something, or if it was just a mistake or not a coincidence. But the second time, it's for sure not a coincidence.
I know what you're
When
gonna say.
he, yeah, yeah. When he goes for the car handle, there's like some kind of sticky
Gum, I
substance
think. Yeah.
underneath the car. And the next day, he wakes up and picks up a magazine, and his hand is stuck to the magazine. And Heather's like, "That's got to be a reference to him being Spider-Man in the past," because I think there's a scene like that in the movie. And I was like, "Yeah, but I think that was Tobey Maguire." But when I rewatched it, that is a Spider-Man comic book.
Yeah, it is. I noticed it right away. I was like, "Oh, that's a reference to Spider-Man."
So good.
Obviously, but it was I like that, yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I mean, like I said, you could get lost in the details of this movie. I think here's what I think ultimately is going on here. It's a story about, you know, our human brains are pattern seeking. We seek out patterns. We're prone to conspiracy theory, and you can get lost in it. Now, this guy found a lot of answers to all these things he was looking for, and won nothing as a result of it, and got his apartment taken from him. I think it's almost a warning sign to like not get lost in all the details and not become one of these conspiracy theory shut-ins because you're letting the important things about your actual life pass you by. I think that's
Yeah.
possibly one of the
Like
things that is supposed to be interpreted here.
so it's like yeah, these messages aren't for you, so don't pay attention to them.
Well, and it's also all these crazy rich people just making their own attempt at immortality, and they have no idea if they'll be able to. We don't get to know if they'll be able to accomplish that. We have no reason to think that they will. So
Mhm.
it feels like everybody's just trying for immortality or trying to have some grasp at that, and failing to one degree or another.
Yeah.
Um, uh, there, the funny thing about the most interesting thing about this movie to me is the cult following it's garnered afterwards, because this movie was not a commercial success at all. They messed up at royally releasing this movie, and they made it a simultaneous release with Mubi, which is one of the really smaller streaming services out there.
Oh,
So
okay.
it was like it was in a few theaters and Mubi on the same day. Nobody saw it. It didn't make any money. Um, Lost money, but now it's got this huge cult following to the point where there's subreddits that just discuss this movie, and there are, um, yeah, I mean, and it's funny too because people are picking apart this movie like the main character of this movie would.
Right.
So you could literally get lost. I mean, there are probably a handful of people out there that their whole life is dedicated to decoding Under the Silver Lake, which is sort of like
And there might be hidden
they've missed the
messages
point.
in the movie. It might got meta with that as well. I don't know, but
I
it
got
is
one for you. I got one for you that I know for sure.
okay.
When Sarah and Sam are together for the first time, hanging out, and she's with all her roommates and everything, and it seems like there's a little bit of a rush to go. Like it's like, yeah, I'll talk to you tomorrow. I can't hang out anymore tonight, but I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Mhm.
And then there's fireworks shooting off.
Yeah.
He's like, that's weird. That seems a little late for fireworks. And she just seems like she's in a trance all of a sudden. She's been normal up until now, and now she's in a trance. And she's like, yeah, I'll see you. And she just kind of breathlessly, just I'll see you tomorrow. And he seems really upset by the fireworks. And I don't know necessarily why you would be. I mean, in Tennessee, people set off fireworks for any reason that they can think of, um, but he's like, yeah, that seems late in the year for fireworks. And so somebody on the internet, of course, looked up to see if those fireworks were Morse code,
Oh, really?
and they are,
Oh.
and it's Morse code for ascend now.
Oh, so that's why she's like, I
So
gotta go.
that was her message from dude saying it's time to ascend right now.
Yeah.
So that was her realizing like the party's over. We gotta, and she's conflicted about it anyway. And it becomes clear that she's conflicted about being there, but she's made her decision. But it's like that's why she looks so sort of upset in that moment,
Mhm.
or at least and why she's so in a daze because she's like decoding the Morse code, I guess, in her head.
That's so
But
interesting.
but that was interesting that they bothered to make that legitimately Morse code for ascend now.
Yeah.
Um, and there's a bunch of little things like that, but there's also things that nobody can decode. And I realized like if I had to stop myself from looking into it too much because I'm like I don't want to I don't want to get lost looking into the
Yeah.
secret minutia of a movie that the point of it is not to get lost in. To me, that's the point, you know.
Mhm.
So, um, but the one other funny thing I thought this is hilarious to me because it makes way too much sense, and it just goes to show how you can make up a story with anything. But somebody said like their interpretation of this movie. So at the beginning of the movie, he says like more than once, I think to more than one person, he says that he had a dog that died recently.
Yeah.
So somebody's interpretation of the movie is uh, this is the story of Shaggy from Scooby Doo after Scooby Doo is murdered,
Huh.
and Scooby Doo or Shaggy is just lost without Scooby, and the team's broken up in wake of Scooby Doo getting murdered. So they formed a band called Jesus and the Brides of Dracula,
Okay.
and Shaggy, now lost and directionless without Scooby in his life, just spends his life getting stoned, doesn't have a job, can't pay his rent, just gets stoned with all these girls, and but he's like obsessed with solving mysteries and stuff, so he just makes himself like a detective in his own right and has to solve mysteries even when there aren't really any there to be solved.
Mhm.
And that's the so this is just a Scooby Doo spinoff
That's a funny
movie.
theory, but I don't buy that at all.
It's no, I don't think anybody
But yeah,
does, but it's funny that it works.
I mean,
Uh,
it,
what else do we need to talk about with this film?
the only other big thing I can think of is, there's this whole part where he hears about a song maker because he figures out a code in the song, and that's where he finds the bunkers, and the guy from he meets Jesus from Jesus and the Dracula Brides of Dracula.
Hmm.
And he's like, I didn't
And
even
that guy's
write these
oblivious.
songs. Yeah, he's like, I didn't even
Hmm.
write those songs. They let me write all the other songs, but these four songs they had somebody else write. And then
Hmm.
he figures out where this party was and goes to this guy's house, and it turns out this old guy sitting there playing piano, and he's written like every song that's ever been a hit ever.
It's a
And
great scene because he
yeah,
plays just a montage of like hits from throughout the
like
ages of
Michael
time.
Jackson, the Rolling Stones, Nirvana,
Where's my mind
Queen, yeah,
from?
the Pixies. And he's like, you thought these were all your rebellion songs. I wrote these songs.
And he doesn't really even go into detail about what like. It almost seems like there's somebody over him that's telling,
Yeah.
like, giving him the message just to embed into songs, and he doesn't even care what the message is. He's just like, okay, I don't know what the end goal of all this is, but I'll put that in whatever song you want. But they make it like he's almost immortal because
Mhm.
he's written songs that are like way
He's
older than
saying he
him.
wrote Beethoven and stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and like the current music too. So yeah, it doesn't, and they put just an exorbitant amount of prosthetics and makeup on this guy where he looks like a monster
Mhm.
basically. But yeah, that scene was that monologue was great. It's you can see why people might think that this is all like a delusion because it's almost like the perfect, like it's like what conspiracy theorists, it's like what the most extreme conspiracy theorists think is kind of happening.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like if all the conspiracy theories were true, this is what's really going on. There's subliminal messages in everything, man. Uh, but yeah, and then there's like a link with Kurt Cobain and our main character through the movie because he's got like a poster. I don't know how much of a link, but I mean, he's obviously a Nirvana fan, and he's got a poster on his wall that's signed, and the girl he's with at the like the actress that he's with is like, oh, I like your poster. She's like, is that signed? And he's like, yeah, recently actually. And
Yeah.
she's like, oh yeah, and he goes, yeah, I know, I know a guy that knows his daughter, and so it's actually her signature. And she's like, cool, really cool. and uh and so later, like when he's in the house with the songwriter, he sees Kurt Cobain's guitar. He's like, is that Kurt Cobain's guitar? And the songwriter's like, I don't even care, I can't even remember whose
Yeah.
guitar. Yeah, probably. And uh and he ends up murdering the he midsummers the songwriter right in the face, dude.
Yep, he does with Kurt Cobain's guitar.
With Kurt Cobain's guitar. How hilarious is that?
Yeah.
And it's like, it's gratuitous. Like I mean, it is very much like a mannequin with a carved out head full of goop
Mhm.
that he's smashing. But it's like, and nothing happens as a result. I'm
Yeah.
not complaining. I'm just saying,
No.
like, he kills the guy, and it's like, yeah, world goes on. Still, like nothing really changed. And I think there's an interesting little metaphor with at the very beginning, he's like watching through binoculars. He's watching the girl that we've been talking about the whole time, Sarah, across the way, but also his other neighbor that has all these parrots, and she's like always topless. And at the end, he gets, she's at the beginning, and they're like commenting on how you can't tell what the parrot's saying. Like they can't figure out what the parrot's saying, and they're guessing a bunch of stuff, and it's not any of that. They can't figure out what it is, and it's kind of bothering them. They can't figure out what the parrot's saying. And then at the end, he sleeps with this uh, neighbor across the street, and the parrot's just still saying that same thing over and over again as he's watching them go into his apartment to evict him. And you can't ever figure out what the parrot's saying, and then the movie ends.
Yeah, I feel like it was
And
saying who is that, but I can't it's hard to tell what it's saying.
well, I think maybe the point, like I think it was kind of a plot device to show you that like some things are never going to be solvable. Like
Okay.
some things are going to be ambiguous forever. I don't know. I might be reading into it more, but it felt like it was there for a reason because it came back from the beginning of the movie. There's a callback to it all the way at the end, and it
Yeah.
ends that way. It's like intentionally telling you like some things are going to be ambiguous forever. You're not going to know what the parrot's saying, and you're not going to know what the squirrel's about, and you're not going to know. You know,
Like there's a lot of loose threads in here that never get
I thought
figured
it was
out.
funny too, like the like he's like looking for code in the Jesus and the Brides of Dracula song, and he just comes up with this really arbitrary, crazy code thing, and it's like his first attempt works,
Mhm.
and he finds words in it, and it says rub 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 Dean's head and wait under Newton,
Yeah.
and so he figures out like, oh well, there's a statue or there's a bust of James Dean, so you rub the James Dean's head, and then there's this thing that's like a statue of all these different Copernicus and Newton and whatever, and he sits and waits under Newton, and the homeless king comes and meets him and shows him the caverns and everything. But it's like it's all so easy, it's like his first guess at that this song might be something
Yeah.
is, and then his first guess at what the meaning of that code is right. So I can see to some degree how you could see this is like not literally what's happening. It's like a crazy conspiracy theorist who is like imagining all of his conspiracies being fulfilled. I don't think that's really what they're doing, but I can see, you know what I mean?
I could see that, yeah. It was a very interesting movie. I want to like you said, you've already rewatched it again. I want to rewatch it already. Even after I finished it, I immediately thought like I need to rewatch this movie and see if there's anything here. But it could just be that thing like you're not supposed to. I think
Yeah,
that is the big overlying message. Like it doesn't
yeah.
matter.
It's like, dude, just pay your rent.
Yeah,
that's the that's the moral of the story. Is just pay your rent on time.
yeah. I would definitely recommend this movie. I liked it quite a bit.
Hard to rate, I imagine. I don't know. For what do you think? What would you rate this movie?
I'd probably give it like an 8. I liked it quite a bit. It was very interesting to me. I liked, the overall story and how everything ended up connecting. But then I
It's
don't
not
know.
perfect. I don't know.
Yeah.
I would have a hard time telling you like specific negatives, except that uh, it runs a little bit long. I would
Yeah, it's
say
like 2 hours and 19 minutes. There probably could have been some editing
it
to
probably
it.
could have been 2 hours
Cut. Yeah.
tight, but nothing major negative. And it just gives you a lot to think on. It's kind of like Coherence that we did recently, where
Hmm.
you know, the movie happens, but there's a lot of chewing on after. Some of these movies are amazing, but like there's not a lot left to talk about or discuss afterwards. And I think this one, it's got enough of like baked in ambiguity to it where there's things to talk about, and there's a reason there's a whole subreddit just discussing this movie,
Yeah.
and there's a bunch of little codes and things you can see, and you could literally probably watch this movie and pause every frame and find a little thing here and there that might get you a little bit more of an idea what's going on here. But I think that's the point is not. It almost takes the fun out of it to do that. The
Yeah.
point is like the journey and the search and the mystery of it all. So I'll agree with you. I think I'd give this an 8 as well. Um, yeah, solid recommendation for sure. What did we agree? So our next movie is gonna be
On the count of three.
On the Count of Three. That is correct. Which I
Don't
believe is on
know.
Hulu.
Yeah, I'll have to look it up. I believe it is. I don't know much about it. Looks interesting.
Yeah, we're gonna go into that pretty blindly. So, and I don't know if we did we say the next movie we're watching in theaters. I guess it's too late for that. But yeah,
Yeah.
the next movie next movie is On the Count of Three. If you guys like this kind of content, please like it below. Give us a subscribe. Share this with your friends. Um, yeah, we'll be back on Monday with
Yeah.
another review.
Comment down there too if you want to. Give us your theories on this movie of what happened and
Yeah,
if it's
absolutely.
completely
You can
different
pick
than
this,
ours.
or if you haven't seen this movie, maybe like your favorite mystery movie.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks.
We'll see you.